Thinking. Voting. Voting. Red and orange, and it's not quite half and half, so it's good to talk about. OK, let's vote again. Vote again. Voting again. Voting again. Much convergence toward red. Let's go through the answers here. So could we replace the call to should receive with a call to the real find in TMDB? We could do that, but then we've coupled the behavior of our controller tests with the behavior of whatever find in TMDB actually does. Now, this is a double-edged sword, right? There's a very legitimate argument that says, well, look, if somebody actually changed find in TMDB in a way that breaks my test, that means that my test made some assumptions about how you call that method, and somebody has now gone and changed the method so that my assumptions aren't true. If I was calling the real find in TMDB, I would know that immediately. That's true, but I think a counter-argument, which is at least as persuasive, is the role of functional and integration tests, which touch multiple code paths, that's where those errors tend to get flushed out. The goal of unit tests is to really sort of narrow down the scope so that you're testing a small piece of logic. And to do that repeatably, it's actually, over the long run, it's better to leave the seams in place and rely on integration tests and on design reviews to let you know when behaviors have changed that make your assumptions about seams obsolete. And as you'll see, this is actually a trade-off that we make a lot, right? One of the sort of dichotomies between unit versus integration testing is the granularity at which you're testing stuff. And unit tests are way more detailed. You can catch more corner cases. But what you'll find is in order to do that, you also have to make more assumptions to isolate the test from other things it depends on. That's how you make it controllable enough to test all the interesting behaviors. But an unfortunate downside of doing that is you might be faking out things that actually matter a lot. And if somebody changes those interfaces, that will affect you. So you can't really get away with focusing entirely on one or the other kind of test. And we're going to keep coming back to this many times. Ensure the API to the real method matches the one that you used in your test. Well, you know, when you write your test, especially if you're mocking out or creating a seam for code that doesn't exist somewhere else, you have to make some initial guesses about how it would be good for that code to work. And you're making them from the point of view of the controller who's going to call it. That's a good place to be. Doesn't guarantee that you're going to be right. So when the time comes to write the real method, that's where the rubber meets the road, right? That's the running code that's going to be in the app. And yes, sometimes that means that you're going to have to go back and change your test because your test began with assumptions that were reasonable when you made them, but turned out just not to be borne out by the design. Totally normal. Keeping the seam in place, but if necessary, changing the spec to match the real API, that's exactly what I'm advocating. So my choice would have been number 3. And remove the spec because it's not really testing anything interesting anymore. Unless it's testing dead code that never gets called, or a code that has no variables or inputs and always behaves the same way, almost every test is testing something interesting. And among most of my coding friends, there's a kind of a proverb can be paraphrased as, you know, bugs that you stop monitoring or that go away by themselves tend to come back and bring all their friends. So keeping your tests in there to make sure that whatever bug you originally were trying to prevent or trying to fix with that test, there's always a chance that those bugs could recur, right? Something like 20% of bugs that recur could have been prevented by regression tests. There's actually a couple of studies we quote in the book about that. So it's very rare that removing a test is the right thing to do. But you'll have to change them all the time as your app evolves, and that's normal. We have had students in this class before who expressed shock at the idea that, wait a minute, my tests were passing, I wrote the code was passing, I'm all good. Now I had to make a change to the code. You're telling me I got to change the test? But I already wrote the test, right? And that's not the way to think about it. The test and the code go together, right? The T in first is for timely, that when you're changing code, you're also changing tests at about the same time. So yes, you're going to write great tests, then you're going to write great code that passes all those tests, and then you're going to realize that for other reasons you've got to make a change to your code, and yes, you've got to change the tests so that they now reflect the way your code actually works. Commenting out the test doesn't count. Removing it from your test suite doesn't count. It's still got to be there, right? It was there for a reason. You had some reason in mind of what you wanted to guard against when you wrote the test, so don't let go of that good intuition.